I heard a story of a gentleman who interviews people on the streets and just asks random questions. And one question he happened to ask people during one of his interviews was, what do you think are the biggest problems in America today? He was shocked that quite a few people responded with the same answer. And I want you to put yourself in those people's shoes. If someone just randomly came up to you in the street and said, what do you think the biggest problems in America are? How would you respond to that? The response that kind of shook him a little bit was the amount of people who said this. And it's actually a meme, and you've probably seen this meme before, but many people said, I don't know, and I don't care. Some of you may have probably responded the same way to that question. And the person doing the interviews was kind of shocked by saying, those are probably two of the biggest problems we have in America, is that people don't know and people don't care. Ignorance and indifference. Ignorance and indifference. Helen Keller, the activist, educator, author, had this quote actually about ignorance and indifference. She said, there is a dangerous optimism of ignorance and indifference. When you choose to be indifferent, not to care, when you choose to be ignorant, not to know, you could live in this world of dangerous optimism where you just think things are naturally going to go good for you. And that's usually not the case, right? She says, I can say with conviction that the struggle which evil necessitates is one of the greatest blessings, that when we confront the evil that we notice and see in the world, that could be one of the greatest blessings that we experience in life. Now, what does this mean for today's message? I believe all of us could see that something is clearly happening in our world right now. You could try to ignore it, but you hear it in conversations. You probably feel it as you think about it. And I know for sure you see it as you look at your screens, whether that's on your phone or on the TV. With all the breaking news alerts, the notifications coming more often, all of us could see that something clearly is happening. We can choose to be indifferent to it. You could choose to be ignorant to it. But all of us see it. All of us feel it. What am I talking about? Think about what we've gone through here in the last just several years. Wars, various wars, economic uncertainty, cultural confusion, natural disasters, world pandemics, racial tensions, political polarization, eroding of people's personal rights, news scandals, even AI infiltration. Now, you can choose, again, not to react to this, to be indifferent. Maybe you're just too busy to care. I don't care, I'm too busy. You could choose to say, well, I'm living in the middle of it, but I really don't care. I don't choose to know. You know what's important to me tonight? What are we having for dinner? Now, other people are choosing to react differently. They're asking themselves the real questions like, what is going on? Where is all of this heading? And here's the truth I've come to discover, is that when people feel that the world is most unstable is when they go searching for something that's unshakable. The comfort of the signs of the times. Today's message I've entitled, Moved by the Times, is not meant to be something that scares you. What we're going to be talking about today as we go through Matthew 24 is not meant to put fear in your spirit, but it's meant to draw you deeper into relationship with God. Why? Because God is the one who holds time in his hands. Why should you listen today? It's because in Matthew 24, Jesus steps into the same tension that we're dealing with today. The same tension that many of us look at the world and say and wonder, what's going on? What is all this leading to? We feel a little bit shook by what we're experiencing. The disciples that were walking with Jesus were experiencing the very same thing. And they were asking some of the very same questions that maybe some of us are asking today. Jesus steps into that tension of recognizing the times that we live in. And he says, let me tell you what's really going on. And even more important, here is what you need to do about it. In Matthew 24, Jesus is speaking what the Bible calls the Olivet Discourse. This is just happening days before he is betrayed and put on a cross. And it's some of his longest teaching. It runs all of Matthew 24, all of Matthew 25. And today we're just going to be going through a small little portion of it. It's part of a much bigger teaching, which is part of a much bigger picture of Bible prophecy. Here is one just graph of one person's take of what Bible prophecy looks like. And you can see it's pretty complicated. We don't have time today to go through the whole timeline, but we're just going to be going through a portion of this today that I believe speaks to the tension that we live into today in our current time. And in Matthew 24, Jesus is leaving the temple with his disciples, and as they walk away, the disciples are pointing to the buildings of the temple. This was God's home. This was the place where they had worshiped. This is where the place where they encountered God, and it was a familiar place, and it was an important place to them. And as they were leaving the temple, they're commenting about it, and Jesus tells them, and he says, yo, guys, just so you know, in about 35 years, every single one of those buildings is going to be torn down and destroyed. And not one single rock will be laid up one upon another. Now, this was like the news alert for these disciples. They were shook at this. They were scared at this. What do you mean, Jesus, the temple is going to be destroyed? There's no way that temple, God's house, is going to be destroyed. And Jesus is like, no, absolutely, 100% without a doubt. Some of you will even live to see that temple destroyed. Now, this has them shook to the core. And as they walk a little bit further, they come to another familiar place, which is the Garden of Gethsemane, where the disciples would gather to pray with Jesus. And it's just Jesus and his 12 disciples. And they ask Jesus this question. They say, Jesus, we're shook at this. What do you mean? This news, all this that's happening is just way too much. And they ask Jesus this question. They say, tell us, Jesus, when will all of this happen? They needed to know. They said, what will be the signs that will signal your return and the end of the world? This is a question maybe you've wrestled with. Maybe you've asked yourself, or as you look at what's happening in the world, maybe you're wondering, hey, are we heading in this direction? I mean, what are the times? Jesus is about to give them the teaching on the times. And he's trying to show them you need to be moved by the times. You cannot be ignorant to the times. You cannot be indifferent to the times. You should move in response to what the times are telling you. So Jesus begins to answer their question. And from verses 4 to verse 36, he explains some pretty scary scenarios that are going to be happening in the world before he returns. He says there will be false teachers who will pervert my teachings. There will be wars and rumors of wars. There will be rampant sin throughout the earth. There will be corruption, political corruption, moral corruption. There will be persecution of the church. But there will also be people preaching my message to try to reach people for me before I come for them. And everything that Jesus teaches from verse 4 to verse 36 is what's known as the time period before the rapture of the church. What is the rapture of the church? It's this promise that Jesus will come and he will take the believers that are still alive on earth at an appointed time and take them up to glory with him, to spare them all of this trouble, to spare them all of this heartache, to spare them all of this tribulation. That's one coming. And everything from verse 4 to verse 36 is Jesus teaching what it will be like before the time of the rapture. And then he makes something very important known. He says, yo, and by the way, guys, no one knows when this will happen. And he says, not the angels, not the Son of God, only the Father knows the hour of that return. And then he continues to teach. And then he continues to teach about what is known as the second coming of Christ. Now, the second coming of Christ is when the trumpet will blast and all the believers, alive or dead, will return with Christ to the earth as he sets up his eternal reign and kingdom. Now he says, this one, you will know what it's like. And let me tell you what the signs of the times are, because I want you to be moved by them. Because I don't want you to be caught unaware, like these other people were caught unaware. I don't want you to be ignorant to this. I don't want you to be indifferent to this. You need to know. I want you to be moved by the signs. And again, why is Jesus teaching us this? To scare us? No. To put fear in your life? No. To comfort you. To bring you peace and hope. Because you know what? We know how the story ends. We know the end of the book. Jesus wins. And you could be on his side, or you could be separated from him. But it depends on your response on how you are moved by the times. So let's begin reading here in verse 36. I want you to see the urgency in the voice of Jesus. Again, he explains here, he says, no one knows the day or the hour when these things will happen. Not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself, only the Father knows. He's speaking here of the rapture. When will the rapture happen? There's many people on YouTube and on Instagram and on websites that will tell you, and there's people who predicted times and dates. And can I just say, if you ever see that, run. Just run far away from them. Because the Bible makes it clear no one knows when this is going to happen. Not even the angels of heaven, who are a lot closer to God than us here on earth, they don't even know when this is going to happen. So when you see some person who's out of their mind and clearly out of Scripture try to say, it's happening at this date, people, and for the small price of $29.99, I could get you a seat to it, run as far as you can. And if there's any of your friends watching them, tell them to run too. He's saying no one knows when this time is going to come. Your job is just to be ready for it. Now, verse 37, he presents something that would sound like a dilemma because he just finished telling you no one knows. But now, verse 37, he says, but I'm going to tell you the signs of when it's going to happen the second time. So some people who don't understand Scripture, they would say, well, this is clearly a contradiction. In verse 36, he's saying no one knows. But in verse 37, he's saying, now I'm going to tell you what it's going to look like. So which one is it? Well, you need to understand, and this is why we need to be good Bible literate Christians. He's speaking of two different events here. This is not one event, it's two events. The rapture, no one knows. But when he comes back with all of us to establish his kingdom, there will be some signs. And Jesus is about to tell you what they are. Verse 37, he says, when the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. There's the clue. As it was in the days of Noah, it will be when Christ returns to establish his kingdom here on earth. So what was life like in the days of Noah? Let's go back to the book of Genesis, because in Genesis chapter 4, 5, and 6, we see some descriptors of what life and culture was like during the times of Noah. Jesus is saying, you cannot be disciples who are ignorant. You need to know the signs of the times. You cannot be indifferent to this. You can't just say, I don't care about this. This is too much to learn. No, Jesus wants you to know and he wants you to care. So he's teaching us this is what it will be like when he comes back. What was life like in the days of Noah? There was a dominant cultural reasoning, much like today. People in Noah's times had explained the existence of God away. You don't need to have God. And in today's culture, we see maxims like God is dead, faith is useless, it's a crutch, it's this, it's that. People in the times of Noah were very highly intellectual, advanced in their reasoning, and they had convinced the people that there was no need for faith, no need for God. And God looked at all of this, and in Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, he says, everything that they think and they imagine, because it was the imagination of man that had led people away from God, God says is consistently and totally evil. This idea that intellectualism and thought and reason had explained God away insulted the heart of God, grieved them. Now, what else was happening here in the times of Noah? Number two, they were living in a time of advanced technology. These pre-metal civilizations had built these amazing cities and these metropolises that were just highly functioning places where masses of people could come to live. And they had industrial revolutions, and they made tools, and they made machines. They were living in a time of advanced technology. Need I say more? We are living perhaps in the greatest time of advanced technology that the world has ever seen. Now, number three, in the days of Noah, there were prominent violence and war spread throughout the earth. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 11, it says, God saw how the earth had become corrupt and filled with violence. And again, this grieved his heart. Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Israel. I mean, the wars and rumors of wars happening now. The people, just like today, back then, they used technology not for good, but for evil. And this advanced warfare just kind of is permeating our day and our culture today, where violence and revenge are commonplace, much like it was in the days of Noah. In the days of Noah, there was also high moral decline. Genesis, again, chapter 6, verse 5, says, the Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and this also grieved the heart of God. And as was back then, is today, moral corruption, sexual perversions of many type, crime, racism, greed, deception running rampant in the days of Noah, just like today. Selfish prosperity marked the times of Noah. This great unequal wealth distribution of the haves and the have-nots, and pride and gluttony and laziness, and the poor and the needy were put to the side and disregarded, was happening in the days of Noah. And if you look at today's culture, where there are billionaires and almost trillionaires, but yet people who don't have basic food or water, we see this extreme wealth distribution and this selfish prosperity much in our culture today. And in the times of Noah, there was also this sudden fear and anxiety. And in chapter 6 of Genesis, verse 17, when the rains started coming, the people saw and they began to fear and they began to have anxiety, but by then it was too late. The ark had gone. They missed their opportunity. So when Jesus says, when I come back to finish this thing, it will be like it was in the days of Noah. And if we look at the days of Noah, and we look at today, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. Now, you could choose to be indifferent to it. That's your choice. Jesus keeps teaching. Look at verse 38. He explains here, he says, in those days, he's talking about the days of Noah, before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties and weddings right up until the time that Noah entered his boat. You see the indifference of people. These are not inherently evil things they were doing. They were the mundane things of life which distract us often from placing God in his right place. And Jesus is saying, just like people back then were distracted with their everyday life and kind of indifferent, well, I don't care what's going on. That's our disposition today. Look at verse 39. He says, the people didn't realize. The people were ignorant of what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. Indifference and ignorance, a lethal combination. He says, this is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. Now, he goes on to paint a couple pictures here. In verse 40, he says, it will be like this. Two men will be working together in the field, same crops. Two men, one man will be taken, the other man will be left. Verse 31, two women will be grinding flour at the mill. Same flour, same environment. One will be taken, one will be left. Now, some people would look at this and they would say, clearly, he's speaking of the rapture here. Because the way media has portrayed like the whole left behind, it sounds like someone got left behind. This must be the rapture. This is not speaking of the rapture here. This is speaking of the final judgment, where the people who are here will be separated into two groups. The Bible describes them as sheep, and you know the other group? Goats. Now the goats are not the goats that we think of society today. In today's culture, when you say you're the goat, that person is the greatest. In the Bible, if you're a goat, you're going into the lake of fire. In the Bible, if you're a sheep, you'll spend eternity with God. And what Jesus is saying, he's saying, when I come, I will come the second time. The church will be with me already, but those who are not raptured up and those who are here, they will be judged and they will be separated. You will either be a sheep or you will be a goat. You will either spend eternity with me forever, a sheep, because you followed me, you heard my voice, you were one of my own, or you were a goat. You were stubborn, you wanted to do your own thing, and you disregarded me, and you didn't listen to me, and those people will be separated from me forever. He's speaking of the judgment here. So he warns in verse 42, he says, so you too must keep watch. He's saying you cannot be ignorant. He says, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Verse 43, understand this. He's pleading with them. He says, if a homeowner, he's using another way to kind of teach them. If a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. No one prepares for themselves to be robbed. No one wakes up and says, oh, it's a great day for me to be robbed today. Let's leave every door unlocked and every window open and just leave everything out for everybody. No, if you knew you were going to be robbed, you would probably keep watch and make preparations. Why? Because you knew the thief was coming. So Jesus is saying, don't be ignorant like this. You know I'm coming soon. Prepare yourself. Prepare your hearts. Prepare your spirits, prepare your soul. Verse 44, here is the command. He says, so you also must be ready when? All of the time. And this is where we cut into the tension. Because there's many people listening, some of you in this room, you want to be ready. You understand the importance and the need for being ready. But you don't want to do it now. You think, oh, I have time. I have time. That is the dangerous optimism. Dangerous optimism, which Helen Keller spoke about, of ignorance and indifference. It's dangerous. When you see the evil in the world, and we see it, we can't deny it, we cannot be ignorant to it, we cannot be indifferent to it. We could see it in one of two ways. We could either ignore it and be indifferent to it, or we could respond to it and it could become blessing in our life because it draws you closer to the Lord. You see, Jesus was using all this calamity and the teaching that this temple would be torn down to tell his disciples, you don't need to be scared about what you're going to see. You don't need to have fear because I control time. Because I'm God and you're one of my own. And you will not be one of those who are left. You'll be one of those who will be taken with me to be with me in eternity forever. So let me finish with just 3 lessons we could learn from Jesus' teaching here on how we are to be moved by the times. The times are not to be ignored, not to be cared for. We are to be moved by them. And all of us here, whether you've been walking with Jesus or don't know Jesus or questioning Jesus or want to know more about Jesus, all of us have a move to make to the times. Here's the first lesson that we learn, is that the times will reveal spiritual blindness. The times will reveal spiritual blindness. In the days of Noah, the people were busy eating, drinking, planning, living life, normal, just like us. And just like us, many of us are still spiritually blind to this day because we're too distracted. Again, not by evil things, but by the busy things. We're missing out on the better things because we're too busy on the good things. Let me say that again. We're missing out on the better things because we're busy on the good things. What would this look like to us today? What is the days of Noah today? Well, it's like binge watching Netflix shows that you're going to forget about in a few months. The way we pass our time today is trying to impress people we don't like, arguing with people over social media posts that we don't really care about, we don't even know, oblivious. And Jesus sees this, he speaks into it, and he says, this is dangerous because you're someone who's unaware of what's going on. And just like the people in Noah's day, they ignored the warnings, they dismissed the message, they wouldn't listen. And we are the same. When all the news and all the cycle and all the alerts come, it's so easy for us to become desensitized that we just go on to the very next thing. But here's what I've learned is that whenever there's this major global event, like a pandemic, a war, some natural disaster, there's always a spike in people who are wondering what's going on. What's happening? Where is God in all of this? And maybe you've asked yourself that same question. God, where are you in all this? I remember Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, the church where I was going to, that was our revival week. The revival week began that Sunday before. Sunday night at revival service, this was a very large church. There was probably close to 1,000 people in attendance. It was a Sunday. There was a great speaker. People were excited. People were overjoyed. It was a great, great Sunday night. Monday, the day before September 11th, it was a Monday night, it's a weeknight. The numbers dwindled a little bit. I'd say maybe several hundred people were there for revival night, but the numbers were going down. It's the middle of the week. On Tuesday night, September 11th, 2001, I went to revival night, and every single overflow room was full in this building. Thousands of people. You couldn't find a spot in the lot. What drew people out? This national disaster, this calamity, this moment that had people questioning. Church attendance exploded in the wake of September 11th, 2001. But look at this news clipping here. This is just from 1 year later. This is from September 11th, 2002. 365 days later, church attendance, the church explosion, the people with questions, all of that went away. People had forgotten about it. Why? Because back to life, back to indifference, back to ignorance. And churches became the way they were before. It's interesting to me that we could shift so quickly from positions of seeking God and desiring God for the things of our life, and yet we could go back, almost put God on spiritual snooze, and return to our normal lives like nothing happened. What Jesus is doing here to his disciples, he's giving them a spiritual wake-up call to say, wake up and notice the times that you're living in. Please don't be indifferent. Please do not be ignorant. Notice the times, be moved by them. And us, we're so quickly to say, ooh, yeah, Jesus, that sounds good. For a week or two, then we do what? Snooze. It's interesting how you can know everything happening in the world around you, but miss what God is trying to do in your heart. So my question to you today is, are you awake? Or are you just functioning here? Are you just happy being busy, productive, entertained, but still disconnected from God? Jesus is speaking here just not to give his disciples information again. This is just not information. This is an invitation to enter into a deeper relationship with him. God is using what's happening in the world to say, don't miss this moment. Here's the second thing we learn. The second lesson is that the times demand a personal response. The times demand a personal response. Jesus paints this picture of two workers, same field, same crops, doing the same job, same environment, but two totally different responses. One person is taken to be with him, the other person is cast away. How is it that this is possible? Again, this is speaking of the judgment. How is it possible that two people in the same environment, same upbringing, same situation, same field, same job, could have two totally different outcomes? It comes down to a question of response. How do you respond to that moment? How do you respond to it? Have you ever gone into a gym where two people walk into the gym and one person is clearly there to exercise because they're on the machines, they're sweating, they both have water bottles, they both have all the gear, they both have fitness watches, they both have a plan, they both have all the apps, they're both in the building, they're both around the machines, but one person is there working in the machines and the other person is just taking selfies, talking to everyone, being the mayor of the gym. You've seen these people. Same place, same environment, same machines, same water bottles, same outfits, same watches, it's going to be two different outcomes. Why? Because one person responds correctly and one person does not. You see, the times require a response from you. You know what this is teaching us? You know what Jesus is really telling us here? And toe warning, okay? If you're new to church, the toe warning is your toes might get stepped on. What Jesus is teaching us here is that it's possible to sit in church. I want you to picture two people in this church service. Same room, same lights, same screen, same environment, same people, all listened to the same worship songs, heard the same announcements, hearing the same message, laughed at the preacher's very mid jokes. Some of you got that. And at the end of this service, two people, same environment, same everything, two different outcomes. Some will respond to the call of Christ and the tug that he's pulling on their heart with to say, Jesus, I realize I need you now. All of these times, everything that's happening, Lord, you're using it for my good to draw me into deeper relationship with you. And some people in this room, you will respond that way at the end of this service. But some people in this room will walk out and just wonder, what's for lunch? Well, what was he talking about anyway? A rupture? What was it? How is that possible? Jesus is telling us here that this is the way it will be. It doesn't matter where you stand. I want to make this clear. Just because you're in a church doesn't make you a Christian. Just because you come to a church service doesn't make you a believer. No more than standing in a garage makes you a car. Right? You could be in church service. This is what Jesus is teaching. And sorry if I'm stepping on toes. You could be in church, and you could be in church for years and still be far from God. You see, Jesus, right after this, a day or two later, as they're walking again by the temple, Jesus would see a garden, and he would point his disciples, and he would say, guys, you see that garden over there? I want you to notice those trees and those branches. You see that tree? That's the church. That's us. That's the people of God. And that represents us. And you guys are the branches of that tree, and I am the vine. I am the trunk of that tree. And it's from me where life and where power comes for you to live. And those who are connected to me will experience that power. And because that power is flowing through you, your life will produce fruit, just like these branches produce olives. You get it? And the disciples were like, yeah, we got it. We want to stay connected with you, Jesus. Now, Jesus also taught, but look at these other branches. They're connected to the tree, but they have no life because they're not connected to the vine. They're around the tree. They hear the other branches blow in the wind. They even enjoy the shade of the tree, right? They see the fruit of the other branches, but these branches are dead because they're not connected to the vine. And Jesus says this, and this is the warning. He says, you know what my Father will do to those branches? He will cut them off the tree, and he will throw them into the fire because they're not producing fruit. And they asked him, well, why are they not producing fruit? And Jesus said, because they're not really connected to me. And that's a picture of the church. You do not want to be the branch, the person who's around the church, enjoys the worship of the church, hears the message of the church, enjoys the fellowship of the church, eats at the potlucks of the church, comes to the events of the church, but are not connected with Christ. Jesus is saying the times need to move you to have a personal relationship with Jesus. Your relationship with Jesus needs to be personal, it needs to be intentional, and it needs to be missional. It needs to move you on mission for him. He says everything else, you're going to be that person who's in the same field, tilling the same flower, but one person's going to be taken and one person's going to be left behind. It takes a personal response. My question to you is, do you know Jesus? Are you in the vine? Or are you just around the vine? Are you just getting by saying it's good enough just for me to be around it? It makes me feel good. It lasts a few hours, then back to my life and back to my drama and back to my pain and back to my suffering. Jesus is saying, no. That's going to get you cut off. It's when you're in me and you made that personal response to me that you remain with me and you're taken with me. Do you know him? Not just about him, but do you have relationship with him? And here's the final thing. The times call for urgency and not delay. Jesus' key point of this whole teaching was that you would not delay, but that you would have urgency, that you would be following the signs and you would be noticing the times and you wouldn't have ignorance or indifference, but you would be moved by them so that way you are prepared for his return. The same way he says someone will not let themselves be robbed if they knew when the thief was coming. Why would you let yourself be caught not prepared when you know the times, you see it, and you know his return is imminent? So why do we delay? Because we procrastinate. That's why. Many of us have done that before. Some of us are chronic procrastinators. We delay everything. How many of you have ever said, yeah, I'll start eating healthy next week? Yeah, I'll start cutting back on my calories after the barbecue, when my birthday passes. How many of you have said, yeah, I'm going to get to the gym. I'm going to get to the gym when it gets less busy, when they add more parking, when they lower the prices, when my schedule at work changes, I'll start getting there. How many of you have ever said and made the excuse, I'll get right with God, later on in life, after I've had my fun? I'm too young right now. When I get married, when my kids get crazy. We treat our spiritual life like New Year's resolutions. And that is part of the dangerous optimism of ignorance and indifference. Because it assumes that you, my friend, control the timeline. And here's the truth. You don't. You don't control the timeline. You've seen it. You've heard about it. All it takes is one sudden tragedy, one text message, one diagnosis to remind you just how time and life are so fragile. You've seen the news stories of how 1 minute everything is normal and how the very next moment the whole world changes. Oh, many years ago there was a group of people who felt life was very normal. They had a neighbor they thought was a little bit crazy because this man was steady building a boat in his backyard for years with no rain. And they looked at him and they talked amongst themselves and they said, this man must be crazy. One, why is he still building this boat? There's no storms. And two, why is the boat so big? And over these many years, as he was ridiculed, as he was lambasted, as he was made fun of, he was preparing. But when the rains came and the storms came, then when things got urgent for those who laughed at the man, they ran towards him. And by then, it was too late. It was too late because they delayed, because there was no urgency. God is shaking some of you up today. He's saying, will you please stop delaying? You don't want to be that person who waits until it's too late to run to me. I'm not saying this to scare you. Jesus wasn't teaching his disciples this to put fear in you. He was teaching his disciples this to say, you cannot be indifferent and you cannot be ignorant. You have to know and you have to care. Paul, when he writes this letter to Timothy in 2 Timothy, says, for God did not give us a spirit of timidity or cowardice of fear. And news stories and what's happening in the world and all the violence and the decay of culture, and that has a way of instilling fear in us, and it could sometimes serve to pull us away from God because we get angry at God and we say, God, where are you in all this? And you've forgotten us, and how could you let creation get so bad? It didn't surprise God in the days of Noah, and it's not going to surprise God this time. And it could cause fear that draws you away from God. But clearly, it says that that is not from God. God did not give you that spirit. That fearful anger spirit at God is not from him. But what spirit has he given you? He says, but he has given us a spirit. What is this spirit? It's a spirit of power. Now, what power? The power for you to control the outcome? No. The power for you to surrender to him. This is the spirit of what? Of love. Of love for God, of love for your neighbor, of love for people, to be moved and to say, hey, I see the signs. Christ is coming. I need to tell as many people about him before it's too late. That's love. Love is not, well, me and my family are good, forget the rest. I don't know. I don't care what happens to them. No, God is giving you the spirit of power to submit to his authority and to love people. To tell them, run to Jesus before it's too late. Now, this is also the spirit of what? Of sound judgment. Of this personal discipline, which gives you the ability to what? To remain calm, to experience peace in the storm. Have you ever known people that they could be going through the worst moments of their life, but there's this inner peace that's there? What is that? Is it their strength? Look at you, man. You're just that strong that your life could be falling apart and you are so peaceful. Man, you are so strong. Is it their wonderful mind? You're just so headstrong that you could block everything out that's going on in your life, all the chaos going on in your life, but you just have, man, you're so good. You just have it so good up here. You could remain calm and all that. Look at you, man. You're just so headstrong. Is that really what it is? Is it just their physical strength? Man, look at you. You're so strong. You're so dug in. You're so locked in. World falling apart. But look at you, man. Strong, steady. Wow, you're so strong. Is that really what it is? Well, the people who remain calm in the face of calamity and chaos, it's not their own strength. It's not their own brains. It's not their own wisdom. It's not their own ability. It's the Spirit of God in them. And this is what Jesus was promising his disciples. He says, when you come into relationship with me, this is what I give you. The world gives you fear and anxiety and cowardice and timidity and running away and shirking from the signs of the time because they scare the pants off of people. I don't want you to be that way. You have power, you have love, and you have a sound mind. And that's what Jesus promises you when you come to him. When you come to him. So this is it. Are you going to keep delaying? Are you going to keep having the dangerous assumption and dangerous optimism that another chance will come? Because you never promised another chance. The longer you delay to come to Jesus, the easier it will be for you to put it off. Urgency is not about fear. It's about your priorities. And Jesus is teaching us here, don't put off what matters the most. Because I'll tell you this, those people who missed the ark, that wedding, that banquet, the plans, the events, none of that mattered as that water was rising. And in your life, the things that you pursue, again, they're not inherently evil, but they can keep you from God. None of those things will matter if at the end, Jesus looks at you and he says, this one I will take and this one away from you. Heed the warning. Respond to the invitation. Jesus is using every headline, every shaking moment, every wondering that it produces in your mind, the confusion, to draw you closer to relationship with him. It's the way he speaks to you. Let me finish with this quote. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite quotes. It says, God whispers to us in our pleasures. When things are going great, it's kind of hard to hear the voice of God because everything's going great. He speaks to us in our conscience when we wonder, when we question, when we're confused, when we're seeking. God is actively speaking to us. Are we listening? That's another question. But God shouts in our pain. When you're broken, when you're steeped in fear and anxiety over what's going to happen in the future or the world or your children, or your health or yourself or your family, that's when God shouts to you. And it's his megaphone. It's his way of waking you up from your deafness, from your ignorance, from your indifference, and for him to say, come and find peace and rest in me. Jesus is saying, come closer. Don't just watch the times. Don't just watch them, but be moved closer to me by them.